Hello and welcome to the Temporal 3 podcast. Today we are coming to you from NTC's National Training Center Conference in Las Vegas. And I am participating, and Charles is participating, and Matt doesn't have a badge, but he's participating.
I have my badge from the conference.
Matt is our guest today, and Matt is from KIDDE. And we're going to talk to Matt about some of his experiences with NICET certification and about codes and about ground faults. So let's first talk about the importance of NICET certification and training in general. Matt, what has been your experience with the NICET exam?
Absolutely, Bryan. When it comes to training, I think it's a paramount cornerstone of this industry. I mean, you really need to vet people that are working on life safety systems, and whether it's NICET or an NFPA certification or a CSA certification, I think that they are incredibly valuable as far as not only for business owners, but technicians and anybody, coming up in this trade. My experience with the NICET exam was, I took it years ago when it was pen and paper, and I failed miserably, and I went back to the books, and over the years I have managed to pass level 1, 2. I'm level 3 certified for fire alarm systems, and I'll be going for my level 4. I know that it's an arduous process, but I think that it really does vet and help you stand out amongst your peers when you're looking at this as a career field and not just a job.
Absolutely. And Bryan, when did you start NICET certification?
I started my NICET experience back in the 1990s, just like Matt and like you. I was in pencil and paper testing at in the work element exam, going to a test center on a Saturday in a room with 50 people and 3 milk crates full of code books and other materials.
How long did it take you to go from NICET 0 to your current NICET level?
Well, who said I actually even passed NICET? Even I'm currently NICET certified. I am actually level 3. I passed all the way to level 4, but it took me a couple of tests, even in the work element, because as Matt said, it was quite a challenge. And I thought I knew my stuff. I thought I had a pretty good handle on fire alarm systems when I walked into that exam. And I walked out of that exam saying, wow, I really don't know as much as I thought I did, at least code-wise.
So let me see your forearms, Bryan. Hold those up. Okay, there's no markings on those. Matt, your turn. Let's see your forearms. Oh, look at that. I think we have some NICET answers written in tattoo ink on your arm. Is that true?
It might be my CFPS that I'm studying for right now, but I don't know. At least I have the NICET. So, hey, Charles, I don't know where you're at in this game. Let me see your forearms, because you're not offering up anything. They're clean, along with his NICET record, which is 0. We're close.
Well, based on your ink, I think NICET 4 is going to be a breeze for you.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I do recognize, especially when it comes to training, is not just about getting the certifications, but it's about really understanding the material, and with apprenticeships, being brought to the forefront, whether it's a union or a state, association that's requiring these particular, lessons, more or less. I think that it's not just about being able to read the material and find where the material is. It's really about understanding how to apply the material that's in these books. And training it's going to continue to evolve, and it is so much the forefront of what our industry is really based on.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's critical that professionals in our industry seek out training, not just when they start, but throughout their entire career path.
As you meant, we talk about all the time, guys, and we experience all the time. The codes are constantly evolving. NFPA 72 every 3 years. IBC changes, 101 changes. The NEC doesn't change that much, at least the parts that pertain to fire alarm. But the other codes, the other 3, particularly 72, is a living code. It evolves on a regular basis. So we need to not only stay up to date on what we know, but be aware of the new stuff as well.
And Bryan, on the NEC, You and I were just talking yesterday here at the conference with the committee member who indicated massive changes are coming to the NEC in 26.
Yep. Yep. Some new reorganization. Most of it will affect the electricians, but still, if we're working in the field, there's going to be some changes to the way information's laid out in the fire alarm article.
Well, and I think it's important to bring up too that a lot of, NFPA 72 is the fire alarm signaling code. And a lot of jurisdictions also adopt NFPA 101, which is life safety code. But it's also it's based on what the jurisdiction adopts in their ICC codes, which will reference these codes that we are installing and building these systems off. Everything that we do is code driven, and it's code centric, and it's always going to come back to that. So again, training in any avenue is paramount to what we do, while we're here and all of that.
Talking about the code does reference signals from a fire alarm system. Bryan, tell us about that.
I was discussing with a student the other day about the different types of signals that a fire alarm system can generate and what the appropriate response to those signals is and what those signals mean. And the big three are alarm, supervisory, and trouble. So let's talk about them and what the required action is. So an alarm is activation of a fire detection device like a smoke detector or a pull station, and basically is going to create an alarm within the building to alert the occupants. It's going to provide off-premise notification, obviously, get the fire department there. The whole point of an alarm signal is to alert the people in the building and the responding authorities that the building's on fire or a fire signature has been detected. Let's get people out. Let's get people safe. The second signal that we see on fire alarm systems, supervisory, is an off-normal condition on a system or device that is supervised by the fire alarm system. So the devices that will normally generate supervisory signals are sprinkler system, tamper switches. For example, if we have a pressure switch or an OS&Y or PIV switch on a sprinkler system, somebody turns off the water supply, that's a supervisory signal. An interesting one is fire pumps, because fire pumps can be supervisory or alarm signals, depending upon the preference of the AHJ. Another interesting supervisory device, one that we really don't think about, because remember, it's an off-normal condition on a supervised device or system, could be a duct detector. IBC and 72 prefer supervisory signals for duct detectors. And, that's an AHJ determination as to what the signal is, but usually supervisory, because again, do you want to evacuate the building if the duct detector goes off? Probably not, but you do want to alert that the HVAC has been shut down, the primary purpose of a duct detector, and certainly take appropriate action. The third type of signal, and this is the one that causes nightmares for fire alarm technicians, is trouble signals. Trouble signal indicates a problem with the fire alarm system or the fire alarm wiring. So it's a device, piece of equipment on the fire alarm, maybe the panel itself, maybe a device connected to it, or a problem with the wiring. And one of the things that I like to say, if you want to terrify a fire alarm technician, is use two words: ground fault. If you really want to make it terrifying for a fire alarm technician, you say ground fault on Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. That's a really terrifying thing to a fire alarm technician, because as we all know from experience, particularly people that have worked in the field, that ground faults can be very, very problematic. Now, ground fault is one type of signal, but you could also have issues with other signals like low battery, loss of AC. Those are a little bit easier to diagnose than a ground fault is. And ground faults, like I say, are something that definitely causes a lot of duress of fire alarm technicians. Charles, would you agree?
Man, I feel that. Back in my days as a technician, trying to figure out a meter and finding a ground fault was something I never really did wrap my head around fully. Matt, I think you might have a different perspective. Let's hear yours.
So, again, with the trouble signals and any signal, I know the transmission time for a trouble to be received at the central station is 200 seconds. So if you have an intermittent ground fault, you have one that's coming and going, and it's constantly going to be setting off those particular signals. If you have one that is latched into place, you got to get out there and you got to find it. I mean, the tried and true method is divide and conquer. You get your meter out and you start ripping that circuit apart and figuring out, meter into ground and trying to figure out closer you get to where you can finally find the cause of the problem. One of the nice things that I really like about, the KIDDE's line of fire alarm panels is we have a feature that is a mapping feature, which creates a as-built map that you can pull from the data loop. And it shows you where in conjunction all of these devices are wired in reference to one another. And what is nice about that is on the initiating side, if you have a ground fault off of a module or a smoke detector, it will pinpoint that ground fault within 20, 30 feet based off of that input device. So that's, it's kind of a real game changer as far as, equipment in this industry and fire alarm is concerned, since, again, ground faults are the number one enemy of any field technician. So
Where was that when I was a technician 20 years ago?
where was I when you were a technician 20
No,
years
where
ago?
was that technology? That's what I'm talking about.
No, it took people like you to build this technology. We realized there were shortcomings in this industry, and we were like, we need to make this easier for people.
Yeah, I mean, normally with ground faults, we're going to tell people do midpoint testing and break out the meter. And Charles, you being a field technician, I won't ask you how many meters you blew up attempting to test for ground faults or determine other issues with the fire alarm system. I'm sure that's very deeply personal to ask you that, but
there was a lot of buildings where I just wanted to burn them down and then go get another career, but I stayed with it and broke out the meter and did the I did the dance, and it's the number one 20 years of being in the field, the number one trouble that I had to inevitably deal with was a ground fault, and it happened on the worst of days. It happened on a 3 o'clock on a Friday, and and you're still putting the system in test, still trying to figure out what's happening with it. And there's a reason why I think the codes have progressed and they continue to progress to cut out these particular types of troubles. I mean, when buildings are settling, they're pinching wires. If you're not, utilizing isolation modules between, particular zones, you have this, this free area where anything can happen more or less, and that's why I think it's important to have these limitations written into the codes for the panels, for any fire alarm application.
Absolutely. Well, I would say too that training is a great way to avoid ground faults, because I know that a lot of ground faults come from poor installation. I mean, ground faults don't just magically appear. It's not some fantasy thing that just just a streak of bad luck and I got a ground fault in a fire alarm system. It's an installation issue most of the time. And a lot of the ground faults occur at junction points, within device boxes and stuff like that. And it's usually due to improper wiring, improper installation methods, improperly pulling the wires. And I think that education can go a long way towards helping the technicians understand what the issues are and how to avoid those issues by performing proper installation. Would you guys agree with that?
I like that you bring that up, Brian. I mean, I'm sorry, Charles, but I like that you bring that up because, in the code, they talk about, here's the code, and then it's also to manufacturer specifications and proper installation procedures. And best practices is something that's talked about in this industry. And you only get best practices by reading, the manufacturer's documentation that comes with the product that you're installing. And I think that whether you think you know it or you don't know it, it's always good to revisit it, just like a code book. If you haven't cracked an NFPA 72 since 2016, you're missing a lot. Everything is evolving, so it's important to stay on top of all of that documentation.
Absolutely. Charles, anything to add to that?
No, I couldn't agree more. Training is absolutely essential throughout your career, and there are so many training tools available nowadays compared to back when. Online training is readily available. There's a number of books that you can get for self-study. We offer many of those. Training conferences like the one we're putting on right now, training classes. On-the-job training is so critical to being successful as a technician, and all of these can combine to make each of us more professional in the work that we do.
Absolutely. And that's what it is. It's a profession, guys. It's a serious business. We're in the life safety business. We're protecting people's lives, and it's something that I've always felt as a fire alarm. I call myself a fire alarm professional and a code geek, but I've always considered fire alarm to be, I'm protecting people's lives. I'm helping making people safe when they're in buildings by helping to educate our students. I think you guys probably feel the same way.
Yeah, it's not a job, man. It's a career and a passion, and I think anybody in this industry would agree. It's
Absolutely.
Well said, Matt.
Well said. All right. Well, Matt, thank you again for joining us today on the Temporal 3 podcast, and appreciate you taking the time to join us. We hope that you all will like this podcast and subscribe to this podcast and tune into our next episode. Thank you all.
Signing off from the South Point Casino on the Las Vegas Strip at the NTC National Training Convention. Thank you all.
Thank you for having me, you guys.
Thanks, Matt.